The story unfolding right now in Hollywood is not just another celebrity headline. It is a seismic shift shaking the very foundation of power, influence, and reputation, as Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds find themselves cornered by a series of explosive revelations and legal twists that no one saw coming, because what started as a carefully controlled narrative designed to protect an image of perfection has crumbled under the weight of courtroom drama, leaked evidence, and the relentless eye of public opinion. And the deeper this story goes, the more it feels like we are watching the collapse of a facade that had been meticulously built for years. Now the audience is not just watching. They are participating, analyzing every move, filing every leaked message, because this is no longer about one case. This is about trust. This is about truth. And this is about how quickly an empire built on charm and crafted storytelling can unravel when faced with facts that refuse to be hidden anymore. And as each detail emerges, the world is left asking one question: how much further can this fall go before everything breaks completely? In the unfolding drama that has captured the attention of both the media and the public, the legal challenges surrounding Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds have evolved into a spectacle that blends celebrity culture with the intricate layers of courtroom strategy and public relations maneuvers. At the heart of this story lies the tension between the carefully curated public images of Hollywood's most adored couple and the stark reality of legal battles, where every document, every testimony, and every motion carries the weight of potential reputation shifts. The saga begins with the explosive unsealing of documents that reveal contradictions and inconsistencies in the statements presented by their legal team, and it is within these pages that the audience begins to sense a deeper unraveling of narratives that had long been maintained in glossy interviews and red carpet appearances. What makes this moment so captivating is not simply the exposure of evidence, but the way it challenges the very foundation of how celebrities manage control over their stories, and how swiftly the court of law can dismantle a facade built for years. The revelations within the documents suggest that the portrayal of innocence and victimhood may not be as straightforward as it had once appeared, and as journalists, commentators, and legal experts begin to dissect each line, the broader public is left questioning not only the integrity of the defense, but also the authenticity of the personas that have been sold to them for over a decade. It is a reminder that the gap between perception and truth can be vast, and when exposed, it can ignite debates that stretch far beyond the courtroom walls as the hearings progress. The role of Isabella Ferrer becomes particularly intriguing. She was initially drawn into the narrative through a subpoena that raised eyebrows across the industry. Observers immediately noted the unusual and almost forceful nature of how she was brought into the case, and this in turn set off speculation about whether the decision to involve her was strategically sound or a sign of growing desperation from Lively's team. Ferrer, who had built a reputation for discretion and professionalism, suddenly found her name splashed across media outlets, and her reluctance to be entangled only fueled further curiosity. The court eventually sided with her objection to the subpoena, citing both the lack of necessity and the undue burden it placed upon her. But the damage in the arena of public perception had already been done. What should have been a minor procedural matter instead became a focal point of commentary, with many wondering why Lively's camp was pushing so aggressively and whether this indicated cracks within their overall strategy. The legal representatives faced the unenviable task of justifying their actions to both the judge and the watching world. Yet as their explanations fell flat, it was not only their credibility in court that suffered, but also the larger public image they sought to protect. The opposing counsel, led by Brian Friedman, seized upon this moment with precision. Friedman, known for his sharp legal instincts and his ability to leverage public momentum, carefully positioned his arguments to highlight not only the technical missteps, but the broader narrative of overreach and inconsistency. His statements resonated beyond the courtroom, drawing in commentators who saw in his framing the possibility that this case was less about justice and more about control, image, and the silencing of dissenting voices. Friedman's approach underscored a critical truth in modern legal battles involving celebrities, namely that every motion and every objection is not just a line in a legal file, but a potential headline, a talking point, a shift in public discourse. This awareness allowed him to outmaneuver his opponents not only legally but also culturally. As the hearings advanced, one key figure emerged in the form of Judge Lyman, whose reputation for fairness and rigor made his decisions carry weight far beyond the courtroom. When he ruled that certain motions from Lively's team were unfounded and that their aggressive subpoena tactics would not be tolerated, it marked a turning point in the case. The message was clear: overreach would not be rewarded, and attempts to obscure or manipulate evidence would face scrutiny. Judge Lyman's words were dissected across platforms, with legal analysts praising his firm stance and pointing out how his decisions reinforced the principle that even the most famous are not beyond accountability. This ruling set the stage for further revelations as the prospect of sanctions against Lively's team became a growing reality. With each passing week, the focus intensified not only on the technical details of the case, but on the larger questions it raised about celebrity influence within the legal system. How far can fame and wealth bend the rules? And what happens when the attempt to control a narrative collides with the impartial mechanisms of justice for the audience? Watching these developments, the story became about more than just one case. It became a lens through which to view broader issues of privilege, accountability, and truth. The spectacle of red carpet glamour now stood in stark contrast to the cold scrutiny of legal filings, creating a tension that was both dramatic and thought-provoking. Yet perhaps the most compelling dimension of the unfolding drama lay in the realm of public relations. The same platforms that once celebrated Lively and Reynolds as Hollywood's golden couple now began to amplify critical voices, questioning whether their carefully managed image was sustainable in light of the mounting contradictions. Journalists dug deeper, commentators grew sharper, and social media discussions became more polarized. Some fans remained steadfast in their support, clinging to the belief that their idols were being unfairly targeted, but others, increasingly vocal, began to express disillusionment, feeling that they had been misled by narratives that no longer held up under scrutiny. It is within this environment that the court of public opinion became just as significant as the court of law. The juxtaposition of glossy magazine covers with stern legal filings created an almost cinematic contrast, one that the media was quick to exploit. Late-night monologues, headlines, and endless commentary ensured that the story remained alive, with each new development layered upon the last, creating a sense of ongoing suspense and anticipation. The story was no longer just about legal documents, but about reputation, legacy, and the fragile balance between truth and perception. As we continue through this first part of the saga, it becomes evident that the unraveling of lies within a legal context has repercussions that ripple outward, touching careers, friendships, partnerships, and entire networks of influence in Hollywood. The exposure of evidence that contradicts public claims does not remain confined to a courtroom. It reverberates through agencies, studios, and brand partnerships. The very machinery that sustains celebrity power is built upon trust, perception, and marketability. And when those pillars begin to shake, the consequences can be swift and severe. Insiders began to whisper about projects being reassessed, about hesitations from potential collaborators, and about a growing reluctance to tie major investments to names now associated with ongoing legal uncertainty. The domino effect that can stem from a single court ruling thus becomes enormous. And it is in this reality that the true stakes of the case are revealed: not simply the outcome of a lawsuit, but the sustainability of careers, reputations, and influence itself. And yet amidst all this turmoil, there is an undeniable fascination from the audience, an eagerness to watch the story unfold, to dissect each new filing, and to speculate on what revelations may come next. The blend of legal drama, celebrity culture, and public relations. Spectacle creates a narrative that is as compelling as any scripted drama, perhaps more so because it is real and because the consequences are tangible. The first half of this story ends with the sense that much remains to be revealed, but already, the cracks are visible. The carefully woven fabric of a public image is beginning to fray, and what lies beneath promises to reshape not only how we see these figures, but how we understand the interplay between fame, truth, and accountability. Blake Lively finds herself standing in a storm that feels endless, and in this second half of the breakdown, the tension only grows heavier as every thread of this legal battle starts to unravel further, and the story that once looked like a tightly managed narrative now begins to appear like a house of cards shaking in the wind. Because the deeper this case goes, the more cracks become impossible to ignore. And those cracks are not just about the subpoenas or the courtroom filings, they are about how the image of a celebrity once seen as untouchable can shift overnight when the weight of public opinion collides with the meticulous process of the legal system. And as viewers are following every detail, they can feel the change in the air. This is no longer just a case about one star versus another. It has turned into a mirror held up to Hollywood and how it manages power, influence, and perception. Because every revelation from Judge Lyman, every response from Brian Friedman, and Every leak of documents and testimony pulls another layer away from the carefully built walls around Blake Lively's public brand. And while she may have believed at the start that this was a fight she could control, the reality is that the narrative is slipping away faster than her team can catch it. And what keeps the audience hooked is the sheer unpredictability, because one moment it looks like her side might regain footing only for another ruling or another statement to shift momentum. Again, and in the second act of this saga, the drama escalates further as whispers grow louder that major studios and networks are quietly stepping back, not wanting to be caught in the blast radius of a public relations implosion that could tarnish their own projects and reputations. The machine of Hollywood has always been about survival, and when an actor becomes radioactive, too many companies decide it is safer to distance themselves than to take the risk. And that is exactly the atmosphere swirling around Blake now as rumors circulate of paused negotiations, frozen casting discussions, and brand endorsements that suddenly fall silent, and it raises the question of whether the courtroom is the only battlefield or if the real war is being fought in boardrooms and production offices where executives are asking themselves if they can afford to tie their image to someone whose name has become a lightning rod for controversy. And as the story unfolds, audiences cannot look away, because they know they are witnessing not just legal arguments, but the possible fall of a star who thought her position was secure. The psychological toll of such scrutiny cannot be underestimated. And every appearance, every carefully worded statement, every attempt to maintain composure is dissected by both media and fans alike, searching for cracks in the facade, and when small gestures are magnified into headlines, it becomes clear that control over the narrative is gone, and what remains is survival in a space where perception can be more powerful than fact. Brian Friedman understands this, and that is why his sharp responses, his calm dismantling of arguments, and his ability to point out contradictions strike with such force, because he is not only speaking to the judge, he is speaking to the public who read the filings, analyzed the transcripts, and formed their opinions in real time and in that space. His strategy resonates because it highlights the instability on the other side and turns the spotlight back on the questionable tactics being used by Blake Lively's camp. This second half of the saga also brings into focus the collateral damage, because figures like Isabella Ferrer dragged unwillingly into subpoenas become symbols of how far-reaching the fallout can be, and when a case touches not only the stars but also outsiders who never asked to be caught in the middle, it changes how people view the fight. What was once a celebrity squabble becomes a reminder that reputations, careers, and even personal lives can be disrupted by the ripple effect of lawsuits and power plays, and that realization fuels even greater fascination among the public because they start to ask who will be next to get pulled into this vortex, and whether the fallout will end with just a few names, or whether the circle will widen even further as the proceedings grind on. Judge Lyman remains a central figure as his decisions shape the direction of everything and each time. He pushes back against tactics that look overreaching or unfair. It reinforces the sense that balance is being restored and that the court is unwilling to allow the spectacle to overwhelm the process. His insistence on relevance, clarity, and respect for boundaries resonates with observers who see him as the steady hand guiding the case through the chaos. And yet, even with that steady hand, the noise outside the courtroom continues to grow, because in Hollywood, perception often outweighs process. And while lawyers argue legal points, headlines paint pictures that shape what the world believes, and in this clash of law and image, it becomes clear that Blake Lively faces challenges on two fronts, one inside the court and one in the court of public opinion. The latter may prove harder to win, because while rulings are determined by evidence, public opinion shifts on emotion, narrative, and trust. And once those elements are lost, they are rarely regained easily. The second half of this story highlights how even small details like the wording of a filing or the tone of a response can become fuel for endless analysis. Because in the absence of certainty, people fill in the blanks with speculation, and speculation becomes its own truth when repeated enough, and that is why this case has grown into something larger than anyone anticipated. It is no longer simply a dispute between two parties, it has become a saga about power perception and the cost of playing games in a world that watches everything with relentless attention. And as we move toward the horizon of what comes next, the question lingers. Will this be resolved in a way that allows healing? Or will it spiral further, dragging down not just the main players but everyone connected to them? The answer remains unclear, but what is certain is that the audience will remain hooked. Because this is the kind of story that feels bigger than entertainment. It feels like a cultural moment where the illusions of control in celebrity life are shattered in front of millions. And once that happens, Nothing ever looks the same again. What we are witnessing is not just the unraveling of a case, it is the unraveling of an entire story that had been carefully protected for years, and no matter how much damage control is attempted, the truth has already escaped into the public arena and cannot be taken back, because now every move, every statement, every silence is magnified and questioned, and the cracks in the image that once seemed untouchable are now impossible to ignore. This is no longer about winning or losing in a courtroom. It is about credibility, it is about reputation, and it is about the lasting impact of choices made when the spotlight was at its brightest. And the stakes could not be higher. Because what Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds face now is not just a legal battle, but a legacy battle, one that will define how they are remembered long after the headlines fade. And as the dust begins, to settle, one thing is certain: the audience is no longer on the sidelines. They are part of the verdict, and that may be the most powerful consequence of all.